Hello everyone, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to dive into a story filled with family, secrets, and a twist you won't see coming. Why did Lin drug Tu Tieu? And what shocking truth did Uri uncover inside Uncle Tuan's darkened house? If you enjoy this kind of suspenseful storytelling, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next videos. Uri pushed open the front door, just as evening shadows stretched across the living room floor. He expected silence, but instead, he found Mom Lan rushing around with two large bags. One packed with documents, the other with food wrapped carefully in towels to keep it warm. She barely looked up, hair tied in a messy bun, worry written across her face. "Mom?" Uri blinked. "Where are you going with all that?" Lan tried to smile, but the exhaustion in her eyes gave her away. "Uncle Tuan's been very sick these days. I'm stopping by to visit him. And I also have to finalize the contract paperwork. His condition keeps delaying everything." Uri glanced at the bags, then at his mother's trembling hands. She planned to do all that alone? Drive across town at night? Visit a sick relative? Make sure business paperwork got signed, all while trying not to worry the family. "You're going alone?" Uri asked, voice low. Surprised and a little frustrated she didn't ask for help. "At least let me come. I haven't seen Uncle Tuan in a long time. I can drive you and bring the porridge too." Lan hesitated only a second before nodding. "If you can go, it'll be better. Tuan needs familiar faces around him. I think he misses you." Uri grabbed the car keys, slung the bags over his shoulder, and followed her out the door. The engine hummed to life, streetlights reflecting across the windshield. He drove, heart heavy, thinking about family, how sickness always reminded people of what mattered. He didn't talk much during the ride. He was too busy wondering why both the contract and Uncle's condition seemed to carry the same quiet urgency. When they arrived at the house, Lin was already outside like she'd been waiting. She opened the gate with a polite but uneasy smile. Her hair was tied back, expression calm, maybe too calm. "Aunt Lan, Uri, you came." She stepped aside and ushered them in. "Uncle's inside. He's awake, but still very weak." Inside the dim room, Uncle Tuan lay on a bed, IV tubing taped to his arm. The drip fell steadily, each drop echoing like a ticking clock. His skin looked pale, breath thin, but his eyes were steady, sharp even. Uri set the porridge on the bedside table and leaned closer. "Uncle, Mom cooked this herself. She said you'd yell at her if you didn't eat." A faint smile touched the old man's lips. He didn't yell. He barely spoke. Instead, he nodded slowly in thanks, fingers trembling as he reached for Uri's hand. But while Uri tried to focus on comforting him, Lin leaned closer to Uncle Tuan, lowering her voice to a whisper meant to sound private, but one he could still hear. "Uri's already preparing papers for the Tien Truong recovery," she said. "We have to stop it before it goes further." Uri's pulse jumped. She knew. That investigation was meant to be quiet, internal, confidential. How did Lin know his involvement? And more importantly, why did she think it needed to be stopped? Before he could speak, Uncle Tuan answered, voice weak but steady. "No, Lin. Let Uri continue. It's time someone finished what should have been finished long ago." The room tightened. Lin stood silent, swallowing something sharp. Uri forced himself to keep his voice calm. "I'm only doing what you asked, Uncle," he said. "But if there's something I don't know, maybe you should tell me directly." Uncle exhaled softly, eyes drifting toward the ceiling as if searching for strength he no longer had. "Secrets have been buried too long. If they remain hidden, the company won't survive." Lin cut in quickly, sharper this time. He doesn't need more stress. The contract is more urgent. We should sign first. Viet is already here to help. Yuri stiffened. Viet? I thought he was busy with personal matters. He was, Lynn said, but he came as soon as I called. He's in the car finishing the documents. Strange. Viet had canceled every meeting recently, claiming overload and personal emergencies. Yet here he was, appearing on short notice, helping Lynn sign contracts inside a sick man's house late at night. The air felt wrong, heavy, like walking into a room where someone had been arguing only seconds earlier. Yuri took a breath. Mom, maybe you should stay with Uncle. I'll go with Lynn and Viet to handle the signatures. Lan nodded slowly, still rubbing Uncle's hand like he might disappear if she let go. Yuri stepped out of the room, but his chest felt tight. He came to visit a sick relative, yet suddenly there were contracts, secrets, and a strange urgency hanging over everything. Even the quiet little farm outside, usually peaceful, seemed too silent, like the animals sensed something wrong too. As he followed Lynn down the hallway, he caught a glimpse of Uncle Tuan through the open door. Pale, exhausted, surrounded by machines. It didn't feel like a simple illness. It felt like a man racing against time to fix something before the clock stopped ticking. In the living room, Lynn grabbed a folder. The contract needs 3 signatures, she said briskly. Yours, Viet's, and Uncle's. After that, we can settle everything. Simple. Simple. Nothing about tonight felt simple. Yuri noticed how Lynn kept glancing toward the door, like she expected someone, or feared someone. The urgency wasn't about business paperwork. It was about control, about stopping something before it spread. He thought again of her whisper to Uncle. We must prevent it. Prevent what? Prevent the truth? Prevent the investigation? Prevent him? Yuri's jaw tightened. Fine, where's Viet? Lynn opened the front door. He's in the car preparing the pens and stamp. Come. Yuri followed, but his instincts screamed. Something was off. Something didn't add up. When the door closed behind them, the farm fell into silence again. Wind brushing the trees. Moonlight cutting across the yard. The night felt colder than before. Lynn's voice dropped, almost too soft. You should stop investigating Teen Truong. You don't understand what's at stake. Yuri stopped walking. Why? What are you so afraid of? You think this is about business? She whispered. This will destroy the whole family. He stared at her, heartbeat heavy. I'm trying to protect the family. Lynn shook her head, eyes losing their calm facade. No, you're digging into something that was buried for a reason. But before Yuri could argue, a car door opened. Viet stepped out, documents under his arm. He walked toward them with a forced smile. You two ready? He asked. Uncle wants this done tonight. Yuri watched him carefully. Why was he really here? What was he trying to fix? Or hide? Still, he nodded. Fine, let's finish. The 3 of them walked toward the car, but Yuri couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was waiting just beyond the edge of light. Not paperwork, not signatures. Something darker. Something Lynn and Viet weren't saying out loud. Yuri swallowed hard and kept walking. Something was about to break. The night smelled of cold metal and damp earth as Yuri followed Lynn and Viet toward the car. His footsteps felt louder than they should have, echoing in the silence of the farm. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked and then abruptly went quiet. Like even the animals sensed tension crawling through the air. Lynn opened the back door and pulled out a thick envelope of documents. The porch light flickered above them, as though the house itself was uncomfortable with whatever was happening tonight. Here, she said, handing Yuri a pen. Sign where the red tabs are. Uncle can sign later, when he's strong enough. Viet and I will witness it. Uri didn't move. He stared at the papers as if they were something poisonous. Why did Uncle ask for this suddenly? Uri asked, voice low. He never signs contracts at home, and he never rushes. Viet exchanged a quick glance with Lin before answering, a little too smoothly. He's weak. It's easier this way. We're just trying to help. Just trying to help. But Yuri's instincts wouldn't sit still. His entire body was alert, like something invisible was watching, waiting, listening. Before signing, he thumbed through the papers. At first, everything looked normal. Legal terms, company clauses, ownership rights. But then his eyes narrowed. A transfer agreement, small, almost hidden, shifting temporary control of the recovery project to Lin and Viet. Temporary. But contracts never meant just temporary. He snapped the folder shut. You didn't tell my mom about this clause. Lin's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened around her own pen. Your mother doesn't need to worry about every detail. This is just procedural. Procedural, Yuri repeated. You mean you want control of the Tin Truong recovery before anyone knows what I found? Viet stepped forward, voice firmer now. Uri, sign it. Uncle wants this. We're all doing our part. Yuri's jaw flexed. I'm not signing anything until Uncle tells me himself. The silence stretched, thin, sharp, dangerous. Then the front door creaked open. Lan stood there, pale, frightened. Uri, come back inside. Something's wrong with Uncle. Uri dropped the pen instantly and rushed back in. The hallway felt narrow, suffocating. When he entered the room, Uncle Tuan was gasping, hand gripping the bedsheet, chest rising unevenly as if fighting against an invisible weight. Lan wiped sweat from his forehead with shaking hands. His heartbeat suddenly spiked. He's struggling to breathe. Uri leaned close. Uncle, it's me. I'm here. Uncle Tuan's eyes fluttered open, half focused, half fading. His lips moved without sound at first, like language itself was breaking apart before reaching his throat. Then finally, a whisper escaped. Don't trust anyone in this house tonight. Uri's blood froze. Anyone. That meant Lin. That meant Viet. That meant whatever was happening wasn't about contracts. It was about control, secrets, and maybe something much worse. Uncle reached for Uri's wrist, squeezing with surprising strength for a dying man. You must finish the Tin Truong file. It's the only way to protect her. Her. Tu Tieu. Uri felt his pulse slam against his ribs. Before he could ask, Uncle's hand slipped away, fingers loosening like sand falling through cracks. Lan whispered his name, but Uncle didn't respond. The IV machine beeped in frantic rhythm, then steadied again. Too steady, too sudden. Uri turned to Lin. What did you give him? She stepped back, offended. Medication. His doctor prescribed it. But Uri noticed it, on the bedside, next to the medication bottle, another small vial, the label scratched off. Where did this come from? Lin opened her mouth to answer, but a voice behind them cut in. Enough, Viet said, stepping into the room. The contract won't wait. Uncle wanted this done tonight. Uri stood slowly. Something inside him shifted, fear turning into something sharper. He looked at his mother. Mom, stay with Uncle. Then he walked past Lin and Viet, back toward the car. But now every step was deliberate. He wasn't going to fake politeness anymore. Something was wrong, and he was going to find out what. Outside, the air was colder. His hand slid into his pocket for the car keys, but he froze. They weren't there. He checked again. Empty. He'd had them when he arrived. He was certain. Lin stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Looking for these? She dangled the keys from one finger, smiling the wrong kind of smile. Sweet, polite, and terrifying. "Give them back," Yuri said, voice flat. "I will," she said, stepping closer. "After you sign." Viet moved behind Yuri, blocking his path. The night closed in around them. Yuri felt his anger build, hot, silent, focused. Slowly, he reached for the keys. Lynn didn't flinch. Instead, she whispered, "You're digging into something that got people hurt before. Stop now, while you still can." "You drugged Tu Tieu," Yuri said quietly. "Did you think no one would find out?" Her eyes flickered, only for a second. But Yuri saw it. Confirmation. "Tu Tieu was becoming a problem," Lynn said. "Always around you, always close. She saw things she wasn't supposed to." "You put her to sleep to search for the company file," Yuri said, voice trembling with fury. "But you didn't find it." Viet's jaw tightened. "We didn't have a choice." Yuri stepped forward, face inches from Viet's. "There's always a choice." Lynn looked at Viet, whispering, "Just get him to sign. It's almost over." But Yuri wasn't listening anymore. His hand slid into his pocket, closing around something metal. His spare key, the one he kept hidden on his keychain for emergencies. He raised his head, eyes cold. "You shouldn't have touched my wife." The words hung in the air like smoke from a burning fuse. Before anyone could move, Yuri turned, sprinting toward the car. Viet lunged, but Yuri was faster. He jammed the spare key into the door, yanked it open, and dove inside. The engine roared. Tires spun in gravel. Lynn pounded her fist on the hood, screaming his name. Yuri didn't look back. He sped down the dirt road, heart hammering, breath shaking. He needed to get home. He needed to check on Tu Tieu. He needed answers. But halfway down the road, something flashed across the headlights. A shadow stepping forward. Yuri slammed the brakes. A figure stood in the middle of the road, blocking his way. Viet. He'd taken the shortcut through the side path. He knew the land better than Yuri. Yuri's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Viet walked toward the car, slow and calm, like he wasn't afraid of anything. Yuri stepped out, engine still running, gravel crunching beneath his shoes. "Move!" Viet didn't move. "You're not going anywhere." Yuri reached into his pocket, fingers closing around a small metal object, his car key. Tight, so tight the metal dug into his palm. Blood pricked his skin, but he didn't care. "You think you own this family," Yuri said. "You think you can poison people, lock doors, steal files, and no one will ever stop you?" Viet shook his head. "You have no idea what you're risking." Yuri's voice dropped to a growl. "Que now dam hai vo tao." The night exploded. A gunshot cracked through the air, violent, deafening. The world jerked, lights cut, and everything went black. The screen of reality flickered to nothing. Only the echo of gunfire, the smell of gunpowder, and the sound of harsh, uneven breathing remained. Darkness swallowed everything. Then silence, total, crushing silence. Yuri visits his sick Uncle Tuan with his mother, expecting nothing more than family care and a simple contract signing. But the moment he arrives, something feels wrong. Lynn greets them with forced politeness, and Uncle Tuan is pale, on IV, barely able to speak. Yuri overhears Lynn whispering about stopping his investigation into the Tien Truong recovery, claiming it could destroy the family. When Yuri checks the contract, he discovers a hidden clause transferring project control to Lynn and Viet. Suspicion grows, especially when he notices a strange vial near Uncle's medication. After Uncle warns Yuri not to trust anyone in the house, Yuri confronts Lynn and Viet. They admit they drugged Tu Tieu to search for confidential files. Furious, Yuri tries to escape, leading to a tense confrontation in the night, ending with a sudden gunshot and darkness.